Given we've got you on, I'm going to ask quite a grown-up question, which is a rarity for this show, framed around rugby and the environment. Is that something you've put thought into? Do you? Has anyone ever sort of, given your love of the game?
Yeah.
You know, the game is more global than ever. You know, we'll have whatever it is, 40,000 fans going down to Australia for the Lions. We've got a URC competition now that is South African teams flying up on a weekly basis. Is that something you've ever thought about? Is that something someone's ever asked you about? Is that something the game should be considering far more than perhaps it is?
I think the game appears to me to have been putting a reasonable amount of thought into its environmental credentials. I think that, you know, sport definitely has a role to play, but there's also a big area of the environmental movement that it seems to exist purely to throw a spanner in the works whenever anyone tries to do anything positive. And I think that, you know, automatically saying that any sponsor connected with rugby has to be, you know, the kind of sponsor that you would not take if you were Greenpeace or WWF, I kind of think is nonsense. I think that sport needs to be able to connect to just about anyone, really. Yeah. And I think that we sometimes, you know, we can have overstated morality when it comes to connection to even petrochemical companies and car companies. I think that we should be open to that, and we should be open to connecting to them. And actually, in top tier conservation, the real movers and shakers are absolutely collaborating with those kind of people all the time. But there are an awful lot of people who seem to exist purely to call out hypocrisy for their own ends. Yeah. Just you know, because it gives you that little jolt of smug of being better than someone else. It's one of the most, you know, negative things in conservation is this desperate will to always see yourself as being better than someone else.
Really interesting.
And it holds back the cause of global conservation, you know, more than just about anything else.
So what is the solution to that?
So I think it is inevitable that with a sport like rugby, there's going to be a lot of travel. And I think that you shouldn't shy away from that or say that the travel shouldn't happen. What I think you should do is make a real big noise about the kind of positivity that can result from that. You know, every single bit of travel I've done for the last 15, 16 years has been offset through purchasing tropical rainforest and retiring it. If World Rugby was to get behind something like that, they could create a vast eco-reserve in the middle of the Amazon, protected for all time, and everything that lives there, tapirs, jaguars, ocelots, protected too, by the sport. And it could be something that all of the spectators and the players could be invested in. And those sorts of offsets are real and meaningful and something that could be incredibly positive. So don't say stop the flying, don't say stop the travel, say make sure that in doing it you're realizing the carbon that's being created and you meaningfully offset it.
So who, if anyone, is doing that the best within the walls of sport at the moment?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, so I'm lucky enough to work for a charity called the World Land Trust, and that's exactly what we do. And we, you know, specialise in offsetting for exact amounts of carbon that have been created by flying, by, you know, other elements of just normally running a business, which is a carbon costly thing. And you need to make sure that you're doing it right, and you're actually, you know, if you're going to buy a massive forest, that it's going back to local stewardship or it's being sequestered to an existing national park or something else like that. But I don't see any reason why rugby shouldn't do that and do it really well.
And it could lead the way, therefore. I mean, in going back to it's not like the LTA or the Olympic Committee or anyone is actually doing this actively now, or are there organisations within
they are,
football and cricket that
likewise are copping massive flack for it. You know, the Olympics got so much grief for connecting to Toyota, and I'm kind of like, you know, the Olympics is not the World Wildlife Fund. It's not Greenpeace. You know, they don't have to have connections that have a zero carbon footprint. That is not a part of their remit. And by connecting to an organisation like Toyota, they have the opportunity to encourage that organisation to do better. So to, you know, be a positive part of the conversation. Saying you're just going to shut out every single industry that has a big carbon footprint is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
Do you get people who come up and want you to reaffirm their bias like that? They come up to you, go, oh, God, and expecting you to go, I agree with you, let's burn it all down, let's stop it. And you suddenly go, which is a very level-headed, commonsensical response, like you said. Do you get surprised? Do people go, oh, I didn't realise you're one of them? See?
I think that people would have been surprised kind of like 5 or 6 years ago, but I tend to be relatively outspoken about how I feel about conservation. I've travelled my whole life and I have been flying since I was a kid. It would be preposterous for me to tell people to stop flying. It's been, all of the great experiences of my life have been through travel. It's something I want to encourage people to be able to do. And a lot of the things I do, are carbon costly, but I recognise that and I do things to try and set it right. And, for so much of my life, every single time I've tried to talk about anything in the environment, there are people who stand up and go, oh, yeah, but you fly all the time. And
that's the thing is, without engaging with that, you're never going to get to cleaner ways of travelling, flying, whatever, because you need to work with all the people invested. It's like people who think that you can just turn off oil. You can't just turn off oil. It's going to take time. But without working with them, most of those companies want to be producing the energy further down the line. You've just got to find a way to work in there and get in there quicker, don't you?
Some really interesting reports, actually. I'll just throw this out. We'd love to get your reaction. So there was a report in The Diplomat which touched on the fact that the 3 Pacific Island nations have a combined population of 1.5 million. They provide a quarter of all professional rugby players. But if the sea level rises continue to double and high tide flooding becomes 300 to 900% more frequent compared to 50 years ago, it's only a matter of time before Fijians, Tongans and Samoans have to abandon the low-lying areas of their ancestral homes. It's the kind of thing where if you do talk about it, people will poo-poo, and if you don't talk about it, you're ignoring some pretty alarming statistics. In 2022, World Rugby launched its first sustainability strategy. They plan to reach net zero emissions by 2040. But I'll go on to say that World Rugby says it's embedding sustainability in everything it does. It's laid out 3 key areas: climate action, circular economy, and natural environment protection. Although apparently during the 2023 World Cup, the total carbon footprint tallies 830,000 tonnes of CO2, and Greenpeace had a bit of a pop at Rugby World Cup's organising committee as a result. I mean, I'm skipping through it, but it feels like the conversation is becoming ever more prominent around sport and the environment.
It's really interesting what you're saying about about Tonga and Fiji, and if you look at low-lying island chains in the middle of the Pacific, the middle of the Indian Ocean, climate change is not something that is going to happen off in the future. It is a very pressing concern here and now, and it is one of the foremost concerns for people in exactly those kinds of places. And there are a lot of very prominent athletes that have come from those nations and are very, very invested in the future of their own, their own home nation. So yeah, they'd be very, very good people to, as you say, really, to be a voice, to be a voice speaking out for quite how prescient the problems are.
If people listen to this and think, actually, do you know what, I want to do something, where would you send them?
I'd send them to the World Land Trust. Absolutely, 100%. So I actually have had for about the last 5 or 6 years a fund that I've been running with them, which we call Operation Ocelot, where effectively any school or rugby club or scout group can measure out the size of their playing fields, and they can buy for pretty reasonable amount of money the equivalent amount of rainforest, usually in Central America or South America.
Can we buy some GBR rainforest?
I was about to say, I think we should commit to that off the back of this.
Yeah,
to be honest, the studio is like a tree, isn't it?
Yeah. But we fly, we went to the World Cup.
Let's not get over carried away, because he'll see profits, he's on a commission. But
I think we should. I think we should commit to that.
I would do that, GBR rainforest. Yeah. But when it fucking kicks off, I want to come back and see my tree. I want to sleep under the tree, do you know what I mean?
I've been lucky enough to do that in one of the reserves that we bought in Borneo, and it was one of the most sweet experiences of my life. To go back to a little piece of rainforest that Helen and I fundraised for and bought, and walk through it and see the orangutans and see the animals that we've given a home through our fundraising. And that is something that rugby players and supporters and travellers and you guys could absolutely be a part of.
We live in a world now where every single article in every single newspaper is doom and gloom. Are there genuine positive stories around reforestation and the environment, or is it all 100% sliding in the wrong direction?
And not only that, but particularly for me, while there are still fish in the sea and while there are still rainforest trees, it is an absolute duty for us to find those positives, because there is nothing that switches people off more than doom. And particularly young people. I work a lot with kids and with families, and if you can give them a sense that there is something they personally can do to make the world a better place, and they become empowered, then they're an absolute force of nature, Whereas if you convince them that it's all screwed and all done and dusted
already.
and there's nothing they can do, then they'll just switch off and go on to a different topic. So finding the positives, finding the hope is one of the key things in what I do.
Really interesting, and I really hope there'll be one or two people, and one at a time. There'll be one or two people who listen, who visit the web. What is the website for?
Worldlandtrust.org.uk.
Brilliant.